Well, it's the news that we all feared. Big Gabby's going to miss the rest of the season because he also needs hamstring surgery. What about that? Our luck has been rotten this season, hasn't it? We're going to discuss that. Plus, we'll bring you the latest on Nico Williams on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. How you doing? I hope you're all well. Hoped to be a little bit more positive around the Gabrielle situation. Hoped that it wouldn't come to this. Hoped that we weren't going to lose another player to a serious hamstring injury that would see him required to go under the knife. But here we are. And I normally try and be really kind of upbeat in my tone at the start of a podcast, but it just wouldn't come out this afternoon because I am bitterly, bitterly disappointed by this news for a number of reasons. First of all, because we miss him for the biggest games of our season, the games against Real Madrid. Secondly, because he's been Arsenal's player of the season, in my opinion, and to be without him is obviously severely damaging to the team, but obviously must feel like a real kick in the balls for him as well. And I can imagine that Big Gabby, probably more than anybody else in the Arsenal squad, would have been rubbing his hands together at the prospect of kind of pitting his wits against Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. and Jude Bellingham, etc., only for that to be taken away from him. And the irony of it all is that just a few days ago, we were all really pleased that he'd picked up a yellow card, meaning a suspension, and meaning he was unable to take part in Brazil's second international of the break. So you looked at that and you went, good, protects him. And then he comes back. And in what looked like your average sprint back towards his own goal, as we look to deal with a Fulham counter-attack, he pulls up and there's a tear. Yeah, it's shit news. Excuse my language, but I can't think of any other way to describe it. It's really bad news. It's really crap news. I think the thing I'm going to find most tiring and most draining about this, look, for Gabrielle, it's now about taking it on the chin. It's going to be difficult. I understand that. And I can imagine that he's someone that wants to be out there all the time, but he's got to take the opportunity to rest, take a bit of distance. Obviously, he'll be in and around the squad, and obviously he'll be at London Colney as he sort of begins his recovery, and he'll probably be at the games against Real Madrid and all the rest of it. But, you know, for some players, these things are devastating, but there is a positive that you can take from it in the end. And it might not feel like that at this stage, and he certainly won't feel that today. But I'm sure when he comes back, he'll come back with even more hunger, even more desire, with a big smile on his face, because I think when you miss playing football, you kind of appreciate how special it is. And I'm not saying that it's forgotten by these players or that it goes over their heads, but you know what I mean? I mean, you just look at Bukayo Saka the other day, massive smile on his face. Everybody was lifted. Hopefully he's come back refreshed and ready to go. And with Gabrielle, you hope it's going to be the same. But when you first hear that news, it is really gutting, and it must feel like a punch in the stomach. And he's going to need some support to get through that period. And I'm sure he'll get that from the squad. But yeah, I mean, it's gutting. It is simply gutting. And listen, it's the news we all feared. You know, we all said it. We said it after the Fulham game. We said it directly after the game. Look, this is a massive hammer blow. This is something that looked pretty serious. His reaction to the incident kind of told you everything you needed to know. And here we are now in a spot where we're having to come to terms with the fact that we're going to be without him for a long period of time. And the hope is that he'll recover in time for next season. Fingers crossed that's the case. But yeah, his season brought to a premature end, which is really, really devastating. What I think I'm going to find most tiring about this, though, is not the chat about how we're going to cope without him and how we're going to adjust the team and how we're going to tweak things to deal with his absence. It's all the finger pointing. It drives me up the wall, right? Because I've seen it already in WhatsApp groups. I've seen it already. This is on Mikel Arteta. It's all Mikel Arteta's fault. There have been an unprecedented amount of hamstring injuries across the board in the Premier League this season. There isn't enough time in between games, generally speaking. We go through periods like we've just had where we're off for like 2.5 weeks. And we go through periods where we're playing every 3 days for a month, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 3 months. And that is not right. Mikel Arteta spoke really well recently in a press conference about the fact that because of the way the schedule is, the training has been cut down to a minimum. And that kind of kills the myth that, goes around, which is that he overworks them and overtrains them. Honestly, they don't get to train as much as Mikel Arteta would like them to. He doesn't get to run them into the ground, in the way that people think he does. It doesn't happen. But what he was talking about, which was a far more educated take than any take that I could give you, was that because they don't have the time to do that kind of high intensity training, because it's about recovery and then it's about getting ready for the next game in a lot of cases, and very, very often it's a really short turnaround. He said that they don't get to train the muscles and the tendons to cope with the intensity and the capacity that they put on them when they then go into real game situations. And because the muscle isn't trained for that, because the tendon isn't trained for that, it increases the risk of injuries. So you can sit there and you can say, this is all on Mikel Arteta. He overworks them on the training ground. He literally doesn't, number one. And number two, this is a much bigger problem than any one individual's desire to see his team train or any one individual's demands during a training session. This isn't that. Now, have we been unlucky with it? Yeah, for sure. Because to lose 3 players in one season to hamstring injuries that require surgery, that is unprecedented. That is not something you see every season. That is not something that feels particularly common. And so there are going to be questions. And I'll always entertain the argument of, players have been overplayed, overworked. I'll always entertain that argument. And I would even concede, as much as I want to defend Arteta on this matter, I would even concede that there have been games over the course of the season, maybe in the Carabao Cup, maybe against certain opposition in the Champions League, where we might have been able to give some of the affected players, Gabriel, Saka, Havertz, opportunities to rest, and we didn't take those opportunities. Now, as a manager, you need to win football matches. As a manager, you want results. And as a manager, you're always going to want to pick your best players if they're available. But I think we need to kind of adjust the mindset. I think the mindset needs to be, okay, I need them, and I want to use them wherever possible, but I do need to prioritize. And I feel like if there was one thing that you could throw at Mikel Arteta when it comes to this particular debate, it's, did you need to play some of these players in some of the lesser games? Could you have prioritized a bit more? Because, we went out of the FA Cup in the 3rd round. Well, obviously there was more games to play in the Champions League this year, which has an impact. We got to the semi-finals of the League Cup, which isn't bad, obviously. But yeah, you could ask that question. Were there certain games over the course of the season where you could have managed without some of these players and you chose not to? Therefore, is that a lesson to be learned? And do you need to start prioritizing going into future seasons and future campaigns? Now, I'm sure that's something that Mikel Arteta himself will be reflecting on right now. But the bigger problem is a football-wide one. And that's the point that I think is important not to lose when we're discussing this. We talked on the podcast earlier today, the one that we released around about Thursday lunchtime, about how you go about coping without Gabrielle, what the solutions are, what the options are available to Mikel Arteta, because we were under the assumption that he was going to miss the Real Madrid games. We feared and suspected that he might need surgery. We've now had that confirmed by the football club. So we're not going to go over how you plug that hole, et cetera, et cetera. Again, if you want to check that out, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, you can go back to the podcast we put out earlier. And we had a few of you guys jump on as well, just off the cuff, to share your thoughts on the topic. So go back and check that out. It's the last episode in the feed, last video on the channel. But having that news confirmed, yeah, horrible. Really, really horrible. And I believe that losing Gabrielle has a bigger impact than the return of Bukayo Saka. Now, obviously, one has a negative impact and one has a positive impact. But I would say, if you had asked me which I'd prefer. Gabriel at centre-back against Real Madrid in the two legs, but no Saka. Or Saka and no Gabriel. I'd have picked Gabriel and no Saka. Now, that might be a controversial opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with that, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, should we put that in as a poll? Because I think that's a really good question. So, would you rather have... wait, let me rephrase that so we do it properly. Okay, hold on. So, versus Real Madrid, would you rather have Gabi and no Saka, or Saka and no Gabi? Let's see how people respond to this poll. It's just gone up into the live YouTube chat. Get involved. Interested to hear your thoughts. I genuinely think that the impact that Gabi's absence is going to have is bigger than the positive impact that Bukayo Saka's return brings. Because I felt all along that our sort of a big advantage against, not advantage against Real Madrid, but what was going to maybe see us through was our defensive solidity, and that's been majorly damaged by this news. So yeah, horrible. Really, really is. I think it impacts the team in a number of ways. Talked about this on the last pod a little bit, but I'll just quickly touch on some of the ways I think it's going to impact the team. I think it's going to impact Miles Lewis-Skelly. I think for me, one of the reasons he's been able to come into this team, pick up in the left back position, develop, improve, make it his own, progress, it's partly because he's had that experienced stalwart next to him who can literally take on an attack by himself in Gabriel. Gabriel's there to guide, to advise, to pull him in when he needs to let him go when he needs to cover him when he needs to. And I think without him, Miles Lewis-Skelly's going to have to do a bit more defensive work, and he's going to have to be a little bit more alert. He's going to have to protect Jakub Kiwior a bit more than he would have to protect Big Gabi, and that means taking away from some of what he brings moving up the pitch. So that's an impact. Saliba's role is going to change because Saliba's going to have to be a little bit more aggressive, because I don't think Kiwior has the physical stature to dominate people the way that Gabrielle does. So Saliba's role changes. And if Timber and White are out, oh my God, we're going to have to play with Partey at right back, which scares the living daylights out of me when you think about Vinicius Jr. coming down that side. And you're going to have a weaker centre-back pairing, and you're going to have a kid at left back. We need one of White and Timber. If we get both, then I don't even pick Kiwior. If we get both White and Timber back, then one of them plays at centre-back for me, one of them plays at right back, and that's how we attack this. That's what I would do. That's my personal preference. That's my personal opinion. Again, I know not everybody is going to agree. Richie says that poll is impossible to answer. That's what makes it a great poll. Do your best. Try and get involved. There's a poll in the live chat for those of you listening to us live at the moment via YouTube. Get involved. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, just I feel like I haven't got much to say that isn't particularly doom and gloom about this, because this is a major blow. And I feel almost like this is blasphemy, like what I'm about to say, but I would prefer that Saliba was the one injured than Gabrielle. I hate saying things like that about our own players. I hate saying things like that about players that are at the top level, and both of them are. But Gabby's miss is going to be huge. Oh. Awful news. Right, we're going to take a short pause. When we come back, we're going to just bring you a quick update on Nico Williams, and then we're going to go into the poll. We're going to go into the chat. We're going to see what you guys are saying on the subject. Let's do that right after this. Remember, if you are watching us on YouTube, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and if you're listening to us via the audio platforms, then please do leave us a review. All of that stuff really does help. Right then, shall we talk a little bit about Nico Williams? Now, there was a bit of an update that came out earlier today from Sam Dean. Let me just bring the post up. Bear with me a second. I should have had this in place already, but obviously I've been completely rocked by this Gabriel news, and I'm all disorientated and all the rest of it. Anyway, Arsenal will have to put Nico Williams in their highest bracket of earners if they're to sign the winger. Unique nature of Athletic Bilbao means Williams already earns huge money. He'd require a more lucrative deal than most clubs would expect of a 22-year-old. And there's talk of that demand being at around about £250,000. You want the most sought after players in Europe, you're going to have to pay big money to get them. Simple as that. And given what I think we're probably going to be able to trim off of our wage bill come the summer, because I expect Jorginho to go, I expect Partey to go, I expect Zinchenko maybe to go as well, Leandro Trossard possibly too, you're going to make a fair bit of savings there. And that means that you can do this type of thing. Now, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but from what I remember previously, Nico Williams is on more than that £250,000 a week at Athletic Bilbao currently. Now, when the piece references the unique nature of the club, the point they're making is that because Athletic Bilbao have this policy of signing Basque-only players, it means that when they find Basque players that they believe are at the standard and are at the level, they have to essentially overpay for them. They have to keep them there because the pool in which they're shopping is really small. And we talked about this on yesterday's episode, so I don't want to go over it again, but that's what that alludes to. That's what they mean when they say the unique nature of Athletic Bilbao. So yeah, really, 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 horrible news regarding Gabriel. And when it comes to Nico Williams, although there's some positivity around that and the likelihood of it happening, he's going to come in if he does on really big wages, and people are going to have to swallow that. Okay, if you want Nico Williams, you have to accept that that's what it's going to cost. And I'm actually, fed up of the conversations around wages. I mean, how many times in the last year or two have people thrown Kai Havertz's reported wage at me and said, "Oh, well, he's not worth that," blah, 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 blah. If that's what it takes to get him in and you really want him, then you pay it, right? That's how it works. And we do have a wage structure, one that we've worked incredibly hard to get under control in recent years. But now, if we want to take that next step, we're going to have to push that and stretch that a little bit. And you could see in our recent financial results that the cost of wages and the cost of the players' salaries is increasing year upon year. You got to get used to that. That's par for the course. It's what you have to deal with. And if you want the best players, you got to pay that sort of money. So this doesn't really tell me anything I didn't already know. I know a lot of people will look at that figure and go, "Oh my God, that's crazy. £250,000 a week for Nico Williams, 22 years old." I know a lot of people will be put off by that, but knowing what we already knew about what he's on at Athletic Bilbao, okay, maybe he's willing to take a pay cut. Maybe you make that money up in some other way. Maybe he attracts a load more brand deals because of the glitz and glamour of the Premier League, which allows him to still earn the money that he's earning at Athletic Bilbao only through different avenues. Who knows? The point I'm trying to make is that I was always aware that Nico Williams was going to cost a pretty penny in terms of salary. And so I kept saying to people that when you look at the release clause and you go, "Oh, that's good, let's go and get him," you have to think about the ongoing cost as well, the salary, the wages. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But that's Sam Dean's piece from earlier today. He also mentions in there that Arsenal are thought to be favourites to land Joan Garcia among the Spanish press, and I think that's probably fair. We've heard a lot of sort of reports about him, so yeah, I think that's one that could be in the pipeline as well. Okay, let's get into the live chat and see what you guys are saying. In fact, let's check in on that poll first. What are people saying on the poll? Hold on, let me just scroll up and find that. There we go. Okay, so this was the question. Versus Real Madrid, would you rather have Gabby and no Saka or Saka and no Gabby? 80% of you have voted Gabby and no Saka. That's how worried and concerned people are feeling about this news. And I can't blame them. Let's get some of your reaction then to the news. He says, even if Arsenal nick a 1-0 win at home, there's no way we win over two legs without Gabby, Calafiori, and possibly Timber and White. Forget it. Tebow says, do you think Calla starts in front of Kivior at left centre back? He won't be available, mate. He won't be available, which is what, makes this even more of an issue. Wes Bird says, if everyone was fit, Harry, except Big Gabby, who would you start at the back? If everyone was fit, I would go White at right back. I'd go Saliba and Timber, and then I'd go Calafiori at left back, I think. No, actually, Miles Lewis-Skelly. I'd go White at right back, Timber and Saliba, and then Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. That's what I'd go with. Ayoku says, Harry, greetings from Canada. We have to beat Real at the Emirates and defend like mad in Spain. Dave Atkinson says he doesn't want Nico Williams. He's not better than Martinelli. They both play with their heads down. I did make the point yesterday that, if you're one of those people that's super critical and hypercritical of Gabriel Martinelli's outputs and numbers this season, then you have to apply that same energy to Nico Williams, whose numbers are really, really similar. It just puts into context sometimes, doesn't it, how people see what they choose to see and ignore other things if it suits them. It's the shiny new toy effect. Nico Williams would be a shiny new toy in the eyes of a lot of Arsenal fans. And so they're willing to overlook the same numbers that they ridicule Gabriel Martinelli for to have him. And then they don't apply that same energy across the two players. And that does frustrate me. But it's a fair enough opinion to have. Yeah, I've sort of grown on Nico Williams. As I mentioned, when I saw him live at the Euros, he kind of really grew on me. But I also understand why people have reservations around it, because I have some myself as well. I have reservations on all of the players that we're being linked with, signing. Your Zubimendi's, I've got reservations about him. I've got reservations about Williams. Definitely got reservations about Benjamin Sesko. Even Victor Gyökeres, who I think would be a good option. There's certain aspects of his game that I don't like, that don't really do it for me. And so it's not like the Declan Rice signing where it was like, do you want Declan Rice, Harry? Yes, absolutely. Categorically, yes. There are certain players that you look at and the answer is yes from the very beginning. And there are others that you're taking a bit of a gamble and a bit of a punt on. And sometimes those gambles and those risks pay off. Sometimes they don't. And we're going to just have to wait and see. But yeah, that's very much where I'm at on the players that we're being linked with. I know a lot of people are excited about the summer window. I am too, because I think it's going to be a big one. But if I'm being honest in my analysis, with each of those names, there's something that doesn't quite sit right with me. Now, I could be wrong, and they could come in and all be huge successes, and I hope they are. But I say that, and then I try and think about, okay, well, who would be someone that I'd go out and sign without any hesitation? And the only person that comes to mind in the attacking sense is Alexander Isak, but that's going to cost way too much money. And if you really want to nitpick, there's the injury record. So maybe I need to start thinking about this differently. Maybe it's true that there's a risk in every transfer that you make. And maybe I'm looking into those risks too much because they're maybe not players that necessarily tick all of my boxes personally. That doesn't mean there won't be good signings for the Arsenal, though. Right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. We already did a pod today, so this is kind of a bonus edition, just reacting to the big breaking news. Gabriel's surgery confirmed. He's going to miss the rest of the season. He needs hamstring surgery. And Nico Williams, if we're going to pick him up from Athletic Bilbao come the summer, we're going to have to pay him a big old salary package. Let me know your thoughts on all of the topics discussed. Make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel and all the rest of it. And I'll see you all very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Up the Arsenal.